Welcome. We will start in a kneeling position. Now, for some of you, maybe kneeling is not on at all, it's not an option at all, and that's fine. You can sit in a different position for a moment. But if kneeling works, some way to make it a little bit easier on the knees, if the knees are not enjoying that closing of the knee joint, is to place a rolled or a folded blanket behind the knees. And this can also help in just creating a little bit more space between the sitting bones and the thighs. So you could have this whole arrangement a little bit further back. That's also sometimes helpful. Of course, you can point the toes, but the whole point of this is, and what we're aiming to do is just for a moment or three to tuck the toes under. Now, for some people, this is really excruciating. And if you do have a stack of books, i.e., a brick, then you can put that underneath your sitting bones, and that will release a lot of pressure on the tops of the feet. But if you're okay to sit with the toes tucked, then you can do that for a little bit. You could check that your toes are sort of separating, so they're not sticking together. Maybe use your hands to separate them out a little bit. And if you find yourself doing this a lot, then change your position. So if you're leaning forward a lot, then change something. That's probably a sign of this being a bit too intense. And just imagine that this is just so comfortable. There are whole cultures, they sit like this all the time, and they don't even know what we mean when we say, "Ooh, this is pretty intense." And maybe, you're one of those people who find this entirely not intense, and that's great. So just a sense of settledness, arriving, feeling the body, feeling the breath, stepping away from wrapping your mind around the intensity of the sensations that are present, and just enjoying giving your feet a little stretch. We'll work with the feet a little bit again today, but also we will come back to working quite a lot with stabilizing the hips and then also the knees. The knees are particularly interesting as they're sort of halfway through that kinetic chain from the hips down into the legs, and therefore anything that happens in the knees, if there's any pain, any injury, often it results from something happening further up or further down the kinetic chain. I'm just talking for a little longer so that we can enjoy sitting here for a little bit longer. So, relaxing the shoulders, eyes can be closed, and let's just take another few breaths here. Calm, settled, steady breaths. And if you're working with the recording again a little bit later, then feel free to pause the recording and sit here for a little bit longer if that's possible. But for today, we'll come off our seat and just come onto the hands and the knees. And you may not be able to point the toes entirely immediately, but let the toes sort of unfurl naturally until they do start to point, and then start to tap the tops of the feet to the floor. So pretty firm tapping. And then sit back on your heels, and this time, if it's possible for you, point the toes back. And you can start this with your fingertips in front of you. We're going to lift and lower the knees. And it's often easiest to do this with the fingers in front. If this is just not at all happening for you, in terms of it being very uncomfortable on the knees, then come onto the hands and knees. So lift the hips a little higher and try the same thing. And otherwise, maybe some of you are starting to walk the fingers back. So the further back you come, the more intense this gets. And again, this is very individual. For some people, they're like, oh yeah, I can lift my knees half a meter. And other people lift the knees half a centimeter. And both is fine. Just see where you go with it. And then release and slide the legs out in front of you and grab something that you can put between your thighs. So it could be a single thick book or it could be a yoga brick if you have a yoga brick. And I'm going to show you a few things that we'll do now because you won't be able to see anything as you'll be lying down. And these are all sort of variations of bridge pose. So we place the brick between the thighs. And the first one we do is feet parallel, we lift up and we squeeze the brick. So very simple, not necessarily easy to do, but simple action. Then we modify so that we have more space between the heels and the sitting bones. We flex the feet, the toes are lifted, and we press the feet down and we lift here. We take a few little adjustments that I'll talk you through. Next one, the legs are almost entirely straight. And then we lift here. There's going to be an option to lift the arms up and overhead, which you don't have to take. And then the next one, we get the tiptoes really close. You can hold on to the outer edges of the mat. You lift the hips, you walk the shoulders under. Of course, keep this comfortable. And then from here, we're going to come down and we're going to remove the brick. And then we do something very opposite for the hips, which is to have the soles of the feet together and the knees wide as we lift up. So we do them in sequence. We hold each one for a few breaths. So stick something between your thighs and then lie on your back. And have your heels reasonably close to your sitting bones to start off with. And feel the even distribution of pressure through the base of the big toe, the base of the little toe, the inner and outer edge of the heel. And the feet are parallel, they're about hip distance. Pressing the feet down in this way, lift your hips off the ground. It's not important how high the hips come, so keep it comfortable enough for the spine. Then squeeze your thighs into the brick. And also, or whatever you're using, imagine also that whatever you're squeezing, you want to sort of slide it downwards between the thighs a little bit. So we're emphasizing a little bit an internal rotation at the thighs there. And keep squeezing, keep letting this item slide down between the legs a little bit. And then release the hips down. And try and keep the whatever you're using lodged between your legs. And now take your feet quite a distance further away from your sitting bones and flex your feet and press your heels into the floor. So the soles of the feet and the toes will be off the ground and you're just pressing the heels firmly into the ground. And you're aiming for roughly, but you don't have to check, 90 degrees between or at the knee joint. And then pressing the heels down, you can turn your palms up, the arms are straight by the side of the body, lift the hips off the floor, squeeze the brick. Now start by pressing your heels away from you. And for me, this is fairly easy, reasonably easy. Now turn your toes out very slightly away from each other. Exactly. Then pull your heels towards you. Nothing is moving. You're just isometrically moving heels towards shoulders sort of thing. Yes. For me, this is much harder work. It may be the opposite for you. Let's see how it goes. Then turn your toes back to neutral, so feet more parallel again. Good. Keep squeezing. And then release the hips back down. Take a moment, breathe. Now, the next one we're going to do is with your legs almost straight. So you start with a little bend in the knees, and then, not unlikely, once you lift the hips, the legs will be pretty much straight. Yeah. So pressing the thighs into your prop, having your heels way away from you. And then the palms face up, arms by your side, arms relaxed, lift your hips off the ground. And if you notice that there is still a fair bend in the knees, then come down and adjust and take your heels a little bit further away. If this gets too intense, you back off, of course. This is really great work for the glutes and the inner thighs, very active. Now, can you reach the arms overhead? This is entirely optional. And can you maybe then turn your toes out very slightly, pull the heels towards you? Good. Very nice. Beautiful. And do breathe, please. And then exhale, release down. Slip your feet a little bit closer to you again so that you can rest for a moment quite comfortably, just letting the legs more sort of lean into the prop. And then for the next one, lift onto your tiptoes and slip your feet pretty close to your sitting bones, essentially as close as you can get them. Hold on to the outer edges of the mat and then press into the balls of the feet and lift the hips up and slide your shoulders under. So the shoulder blades are starting to squeeze towards each other a little bit. And then also still squeeze the brick between your thighs and also still breathe. So these versions can be really good to release the piriformis apart from, activating inner thighs and strengthening glutes. And the piriformis often can cause problems if it's tight and presses into a nerve that runs through it, the sciatic nerve, and causes sciatica. Um, so hopefully this is not something you experience, but I know for some of you this is going to be relevant. If it causes any pain, though, you back off. You always stay in a pain-free zone with any of the, exercises, particularly with sciatica, and then release all the way back down. Good. Now remove the brick, and just for a moment, with the heels really close to the hips, let the knees come wide, soles of the feet are together, and just rest here for a moment. So this is now going into more of a passive stretch. And we're moving from an internal rotation at the hip joint into external rotation. We're abducting the legs where we adducted before. So we're playing with the different planes of movement at the hip joint. Now, of course, you could simply stay here or let this become a little bit more active again and press the outer edges of the feet into the floor and lift the hips off the ground. Good. And if this is very intense, then move with the breath, up with the inhale, down with the exhale. And some of you have the feet a little too far away from you. So the feet are as close to your hips as you can get them. Slide them in as much as you can. And when you feel ready, when you've had enough, then come back down. Now, we're going to do one more thing along sort of similar lines, the strengthening action. This is a little bit different. So now you may need a stack of books if you're using books. If you're using bricks, then take the brick to the medium setting. So you will probably have to sit up to arrange this. Medium height, if you have two bricks, you can stack the bricks, two of them on top of each other. So you want some fair amount of height. And then you place one heel on top of the brick and you'll lie down in a moment. The toes will be facing out and the other foot is flat on the floor. So you just need to make sure that this leg can be straight while the heel is on the brick. So you might have to adjust this slightly. Take the palms down. So the foot that's on the brick, turn the toes out away from you. Press the other foot into the floor and then lift the hips, pressing the foot down, maybe pressing the hands down if this is useful. Maybe you can play with releasing the pressure from the hands and arms and just use the bent knee foot and the other leg. Maybe you can shift the weight more into the outer edge of the foot that's on the brick and remove the weight also from the foot that's on the floor, just exploring. And then exhale, release the hips back down. And we'll do this twice more. We'll add on if that's working. So take an inhale, again, lift your hips off the floor. Now, the next step here would be to reach your arms up towards the ceiling. If this is a bit much, keep your arms down. Again, can you play with taking the weight off the sort of standing foot that is flat on the floor? And press the outer edge of the other foot further down into the ground. And then release back down. Now do it one more time. So again, same leg still, just so it's a little easier. Lift your hips off the floor, then lift your arms up. And then the very last step would be, and again, all optional, lift the standing foot off the floor and hover it. And this is, more intense. So the foot hovers off the ground. You could even stretch the leg up to the ceiling. If you have any hip situation going on, you want to take it very carefully. This can become pretty intense pretty quickly. Beautiful variations, guys. And then release down. Release your arms down as well. Good. Then see if you can find a simple way of shifting the brick to the other side to place the other foot on it. You might have to come up and adjust. And eventually, once the heel is on the brick, then the toes turn out. So you're getting the little toe edge of the foot onto the brick. And the other knee is bent, the foot is flat on the floor, the arms are by your side, and then lift your hips. So the heel that is on the props, turn the toes out. Yes, that's right. Little toe edge onto the props. Good. Now, can you make the weight in the arms lighter? Just play with it a little bit. On the first one, we just play a little bit. No need to lift anything yet. Can you also make the weight on the foot a little lighter? Maybe then the arms become a little more supportive again. And then exhale, release down. Great. Now, again, pressing the outer edge of the foot into the brick, pressing the other foot into the floor. Take an inhale, lift the hips. And this time, can you lift your arms up toward the ceiling? Can you play with shifting more weight into the outer edge of the foot on the prop and remove some weight from the standing foot? And the intensity of this will vary a lot with the height of your prop. And then exhale, release down. So you could vary the height of the prop and see what happens. And then let's take one final round, lifting the hips, maybe lifting the arm, maybe lifting the standing foot off the floor. You could keep the knee bend or extend the leg up and breathe. And then come down. Good. And take both feet to the floor for a moment. Take your feet as wide as the mat and just drop the knees side to side, taking a sort of loose windshield wiper action. You can take the arms a little further distance away from the body, just releasing the feet, the knees, the thighs. And then grab your belt. I hope you all have a belt. Otherwise, you have to use your imagination a lot. And you need a fairly small loop, and the looped bit will go around your legs, and you'll come to lie on your side. So lie on one side, and you can choose a side where you can see me, first of all, and prop your head up on the elbow, and the knees are bent, so the legs are stacking on top of each other. And once you're there, lift the top leg and press it up and into the belt. Now spread your toes. Think about lifting the heel just marginally higher than the knee, not much. Spreading the toes, and the bottom leg presses down into the floor, and the top leg presses up into the belt. Good. Can you straighten the top leg away from you? So the thigh stays in the same alignment, so the thighs are parallel, still pressing the thighs away from each other. Pretty soon this is going to get pretty intense, if it isn't already. And then bend the knee and relax. Good. If you've only just started, then continue. Take your time. Good. Now, similar thing, but we're going to keep the heels together this time. So aim to keep the heels together, spread your toes, and then lift the top knee. So now the top foot is definitely lower than the knee. The heels are aiming to stay together, and the bottom leg presses down into the floor. The top leg presses up into the belt. And can you, keeping the thighs exactly as they are, straighten the leg again? So it's going to have a slightly different trajectory, not wildly different, just a little bit different to before. Great. And then release. And then roll onto your back and just roll to the side from here, placing the feet on the floor. Belt is still in place. Lift the hips, one more bridge pose here. Press the thighs out this time. This activates different parts of the glutes. So if this is not useful, if you feel any pain, any sciatic pain, then you release your back off immediately. And then release down, and then rotate yourself over to the other side, and we'll do the same two actions on the other side. So prop your head on your arm and have your legs, they're about 90-degree angles, and then press the top leg into the belt, having the top heel just a tiny bit higher than the knee. If this causes any problems for the knee, you keep it the same height. And keep pressing up into the belt. Keep also pressing down into the floor with the bottom thigh. And then can you extend the top leg? Still squeezing thighs away from each other, keeping the thighs entirely parallel, squeezing away. So this is also great stabilizing work for the knee, and we'll do a little bit more on that release for a moment in a moment. So bringing the legs together for a moment. And this time with the next one, with the last one, keep your heels together and squeeze the heels into each other, and then lift the top knee up and press the top knee into, or the top thigh rather, into the belt. So the knees are separating, the heels stay together. It's a little bit of a clamshell situation going on. And use some fair amount of power and strength. Maybe straighten that top leg. And then bend the knee and release. Great. And then remove the belt and grab your prop again. And you could come back to your first side, lying on your side again, taking the head into the bottom hand. This time have your legs straight, and you need quite a high stack of books or a high setting brick, and bend the top knee and place the knee on top of the brick, and the knee is about in line with your hip. Now again, lift the top heel just a touch higher than the knee, and everything that touches the floor, press it down. The top hand could rest on the thigh. Really press that knee down. This is not easy, but again, this is nice stabilizing work for the knee. Press the bottom leg into the floor, the outer edge of the bottom foot into the ground. And then release. And take maybe just one book, or take your brick at maybe the narrowest setting and bring it between your legs, and then squeeze your legs together. You can even lift your bottom foot off the floor. You can stabilize yourself with your fingertips on the floor in front. The bottom leg doesn't have to lift. To see how it goes when you squeeze the legs together really firmly. Good. Lovely. And then release. Now, the next one is a little bit like a tree pose. Keep your prop as it is and place the foot onto the prop. If that doesn't work, you could place the foot a little bit further away from you and have the prop in front of you, and then you may want to very gently support the knee from the inside. But if you can place the prop on your leg and then the foot on the prop, then have your hand, the free hand, behind the knee, squeeze the top foot down, and at the same time press the top knee back into the hand. So there's lots of things going on. The bottom leg presses into the floor, the top foot presses into the prop, the top knee presses back and into the hand. And then exhale, release. Swap sides, so you can just turn yourself around. And bottom leg straight. Take the top knee onto a high setting prop with the knee approximately in line with the hip, and the top hand can rest on the thigh, and then press. Good, very nice. Squeeze the bottom leg into the floor. Top heel is a little bit higher than the top knee. Great. And then relax, release. Bring the prop between your legs, stack your legs on top of each other. Have both legs sort of straight and squeeze the legs together. And that may mean that maybe even the bottom leg or bottom foot come off the floor a little bit, but it doesn't need to be the case. Just see where you go as you squeeze together. Great. And then release. And the last one is the tree pose variation. So keep the prop on your leg, place the foot onto the prop, and again, if that doesn't work, modify with the foot in front rather than on top. Bottom leg is straight, and you can either, if the foot is in front, you're supporting the knee from the inside. Otherwise, and this is more stabilizing for the knee, place the hand to the outside of the knee, and then you're pressing the top knee into the hand, you're pressing the top foot into the prop, you're pressing the bottom leg into the floor. Good, lovely. And then release and come up to sit. And just take a moment to look at a foot. So whichever way you can do this, you can bend one knee. So you want to be able to see the sole of the foot. Maybe the foot is composed of 26 bones and 33 joints, which is a lot. I mean, think about it. You know, there's a lot of stuff happening here. And there are 3 arches that support the structure and the stability and the mobility of the foot. There's the inner arch running from the heel to the base of the big toe. This is the medial longitudinal arch. There's the lateral longitudinal arch, which runs from the heel to the base of the little toe, and then there's a transverse arch. And we need these 3 arches to be really stable through the whole foot with all those joints and bones, through the whole ankle, so that we have a balanced gait when we walk, so that everything is then shifting up the kinetic chain in a healthy manner. And, you know, as I said last week, this is not necessarily the case for us as we encase our feet in shoes, which is not particularly helpful. We walk on flat, even surfaces, so we never have to really explore the stability or strengthen the stability of the ankle joint. So we'll do a little bit more work around that so that we can work with, you can imagine it's a sort of tripod structure, base of the big toe, base of the little toe, and then the center of the heel. They create this tripod. We want the arches to be working. We want the inner arch to be lifted, the outer arch to be lifted, and then there is stability through the whole foot. So take a prop like a brick. It could also be a stack of books, and you may want to be close to the wall. This can be helpful, at least for some people. And I quite like to have the medium height brick, but you could certainly start with the lowest height and place one foot on the prop. And you may overlap a little bit, so you have to see whether you shift forwards or backwards a little bit more. And stand up and let the other leg dangle so that the hips are pretty much level with each other. And then start to swing the leg where the foot is in the air so that there is hardly any, it's a bit like a, like a pendulum from a clock. Once you get it to swing, it just continues. Well, you know what I mean. There's a sort of almost effortless swinging here. And you may notice that there is constant adjustment in the ankle of the standing foot. And there is also, particularly after a while, something going on in the glute there. So we're working the two ends of that chain from the toes to the hip at the same time. Now come to center, dangling, and then think about tapping the toes to the floor and lifting the hip back up. So try and keep the standing leg straight. You're going down and then you push into the standing foot to lift up again. You come down and you lift up again. And you can try this without even touching the floor. And this is where I like the slightly higher setting so that I have a little bit more room to move, but it can also very easily make it a lot more unstable. We're just playing with this a little bit. Fingers could be on the wall. Now coming back to center and just do a little bit more of a muscular rather than a free flow swinging lift forwards and backwards. So the flexion and the extension. And then go across, so out and in. So the adduction and the abduction. And then step off your prop and feel both feet on the ground for a moment. Notice maybe difference. One leg has worked a lot harder than the other just now. How does that feel? And then step the other foot onto the prop. Finding your balance there, letting the ankle adjust initially, and you can maybe get a sense of those arches supporting the foot, the base of the big toe, base of the little toe, and the heel, and then swing the free leg. You want to swing pretty freely. You want to keep your hips pretty much level with each other. So imagine there is just no resistance. And you don't have to lift the leg very high. It's just a dangly, very light, loose swing. Great. And then come to center, refine your balance, and then lower and lift the hip to lower and lift the bottom foot or the hanging foot, and use your standing leg a lot to lift with stability rather than just hoisting up the hip. So you're moving up and down and up and down. Good. And then do a little bit more of a slower and more muscular, lifting the leg and then extending the leg back. Lifting, flexion, and then getting the leg back, extension. And then go side to side. So adduction and abduction. Great. Come to center and then step off and just feel the feet. Notice how it all is. And then take your brick close to a wall, and you don't, or book, you need maybe about 5-7 centimeters. You don't need an awful lot. You need just a little bit of height. And you will bring just the balls of the feet onto the brick, and you can take your fingertips to the wall. So the brick is, let's say, about a foot away from the wall, and make it so that both feet can come onto the brick or prop Take an inhale and lift high onto your tiptoes. And then exhale, release the heels down lower than the balls of the feet if you can. And then press into the balls of the feet, lift the heels as high as you can. And exhale, lower the heels as much as you can, letting them drop almost to the floor. Inhale, lifting. And exhale, lowering. And of course, there may come a point where your prop tips and then you back off from that. But otherwise, continue to lift and to lower a couple more times. See how that feels. Maybe the lowering feels pretty prominently in the calves. You may notice that one of the two actions is much simpler than the other. And then eventually step off your prop. And you can keep your fingers on the wall and lift up onto your tiptoes and lower back down. And you could simply stay with this, trying to be very symmetrical. Or you could start to play with this, so shifting the weight to the side, and imagine you're drawing little circles. You're shifting weight from the inner edge to the outer edge of the foot. And I like to move my feet in parallel rather than sort of circling in opposite directions. And then change direction. Yeah, this is looking great. Lovely. Good. And then come back down. And then you can repeat the same thing again, or same thing, but lift one foot off the floor and start with bent knees. And then lift, maybe you're going to the outside first, you're shifting to the inside, you're releasing back down, and maybe even trying to never bring the heel fully to the floor. So here the arches really have to switch on, circling in both directions. Maybe changing sides again and trying a more straight leg. To me, this is much harder. And again, going in both directions. And then swapping sides. Taking the other foot to the floor, start with a bent knee. And you could just lift and lower, or you go around in a circle on the ball of the foot. Or you do it with both feet together, of course. Changing sides if you haven't done so yet. Try with a straight leg, maybe, for the last few rounds. The lifted foot can be bent, of course, it needs to be bent a little bit, but the standing leg can be straight. And then maybe again, changing sides for the last time. And then release. Good. Let's do just a tiny little counter stretch. Reach your arms up, touch your fingertips together, and take the tiptoes of one foot behind you. Maybe point the toes all the way back. If that's too tricky, then tuck the toes under slightly and shift your hips forward a little bit. Lift the chest up toward the ceiling. So we're just giving a little counter stretch to the foot and also to the whole front of the leg. Releasing the arms down, stepping the foot down, and swapping sides. Arms up, fingers together, and the hips move forward. So if you can move the hips, you'll accentuate the stretch along the leg that is taken back slightly. And then releasing the hands down and come to sit down and grab a blanket or a cushion, something soft. You may not even need it, but just in case. And have one leg long and have one heel close to the groin and hold your bent knee and then lift the other leg. If you need to bend the knee a little bit, that's fine. If you can straighten the leg, that's fine. There's no need to lift the leg very high. And then place something on top of the shin. which together with having been here for a few moments now, really changes things quite drastically. And I did this earlier today. I had a much lighter blanket, so it was somehow more pleasant. If you don't have anything that sticks, don't worry. And then release down. So this is strong strengthening work for the hip. And then change sides. So having the prop nearby, lift the other leg. You're holding on to the bent knee. This may well be enough, and the top leg doesn't have to be straight. But if you would like to experiment, then place something on top. And for me, I mean, my leg starts shaking a little. Not a bad thing. Just means the muscles are still working. And then release down. And then take your legs wide. They don't have to be super wide, and you want to aim to keep your legs straight. So that may mean for some of you having the legs a little closer to each other. See if you can lift one foot and then the other. And if that doesn't work, bring the legs closer, and then it'll become much easier to lift the feet. So just go to that place where you are meeting a little bit of an edge. Lift one foot. Can you draw little sort of semicircles with the heel? So again, thigh is working extra hard. Release down. Lift the other leg. If this is very hard, lean back a little bit and take your fingers behind you. Otherwise, if this is not so hard, lift your hands off the floor completely. And then release down. Now, get a prop and maybe start on this sort of height, about 10 centimeters, and have your feet to one side of the prop. And you're sitting in Dandasana, so you could have fingertips behind you if it's really hard to stay upright, or have your arms free, and lift one heel and then the other leg over the prop. Now, if you notice this is easy peasy, then change the height of the prop. Keep the spine really straight. This is just a little test. And then we do the more interesting thing, which is both legs together. So this is a much different dynamic, at least for me. And you can lean back a little bit. You can use your abdominals to help you if they're there. Good, nice. Keep going. Last few rounds. Good. And then swing your feet back. Come onto the hands and knees and step one foot forward. And we're going to take it into a half split position. So one leg is straight and the other hip, or the hips, both hips in fact, are sort of over the back knee. And you could definitely have a prop underneath your fingertips here. So maybe a brick on each side or a book on each side. And then press your fingers down. Try and keep your spine straight, but you may need a little bit of rounding, a little bit of abdominal engagement. Lift the foot and move it side to side. Very nice. Then place the foot back down. Now bend the front knee, point the back toes, and sort of hang forward a little bit. Let the front knee come over the line of the toes, so the front knee can come fairly far forward. And the hands can be on the ground or fingertips on the ground, so you're supporting yourself, so you're not putting too much pressure on the knee ligament. With the back toes pointed, can you lift the back knee off the floor and then let the hips come down? So the knee is lifted, but the hips come down. Essentially, you want to accentuate the stretch for the front of the thigh, the hip flexors, as a counter stretch to all that strong hip flexor work we've been doing. And then release the knee back down, step back to all fours, and step the other foot forward, changing sides. You want to start with that leg straight, so the hips shift back. It's this half split position. Fingertips press down into something, lift the foot, move side to side. Check that you're still breathing. A little bit abdominals, maybe as little as possible. Release the foot down, shift the weight forward, come into the lunge, and see if you can just shift way forward. So hanging forward a little bit, using this as a counter stretch. For some of you, maybe a fair stretch on the ankle and the calf. Can you point the back toes? Can you then lift the back knee? And as the back knee is lifted, support yourself enough with your hands, shift your weight forward enough. Can you sink the hips down a little bit? Just so you could explore, what does it feel? The stretch here at the top of the thigh, the iliopsoas muscle. So psoas is part of the sort of deep hip flexors. They're often very tight. And when they put a lot of pressure on the lower back and they pull the muscles of the lower back inwards and they can cause back pain. So stretching the front of the thighs can be really helpful for back pain. Releasing and then shifting everything back, stepping back to all fours. And then coming to a seated position once more. Place your feet wide. And the knees are bent, and reach your arms inside the legs. And then reach your chest forward. So you're sort of snuggling the torso through the legs. Good. If this is quite easy and you would like to do a straight-legged version of this, then of course you can. But bent knees is often more accessible. It's also quite a nice hip stretch. So we do so much stabilizing work, it's good to throw in a stretch here and there. And then come back up. And lie on your front. Hold on to your elbows with opposite hands. And then bend and extend your knees. If this is a little strong on the back, then shift your forearms further forward and you may well stay with this. Or for a stronger thigh stretch, keep one leg straight, lift the other foot, reach back and squeeze the heel in. You're aiming to squeeze toward the outer hip. You could turn your fingers out and forward with the elbow lifted, but you don't have to. And the chest is lifted, so the forearm that's still on the ground presses down. And then change sides. And continue. So the psoas, iliopsoas, is the full muscle. It consists of two muscles, the iliacus and the psoas muscle. The psoas runs from T12, is attached to all the lumbar vertebrae, and then comes down and sort of forward, and the iliacus starts inside the rim of the pelvis, just here. You can squeeze into it. And then you can release, you can come up to sit for a moment, and then they join and they have a joint ligament that then attaches to the inside of the femur bone, to the inside of the thigh bone. So there is a sort of real connection from the front here into the back. So you can imagine if the front becomes really tight, this happens. I'm exaggerating, of course. The muscle pulls in here. Often people are starting to have a really sort of pulled in muscles around the spine and can lead to lordosis of the lower back and then leads to back pain from there. So just to expand a little bit more on what I said before. So we do a couple more psoas stretches. You have to sort of see where you go with this, and it doesn't work in the same way for everyone. So I would say the most accessible psoas stretch that we can do that works for most people, of course not all, is this sort of thing that we did just before, and then really releasing into the stretch, so letting the weight come down into the stretch. The other things work for you if you have a happy enough back. So we do a supported bridge pose, and then we take one knee into the chest, and you could use your belt if you cannot reach your leg. Take your belt around the thigh so that you can pull in a little bit, and then the other leg comes straight. So this is where we're opening the front of the thigh. And if you have a lower brick, then you may not feel that very well or sufficiently, but you can explore. And then from here, after a moment, I'll show you first so that we can do both together. We will release the foot back to the floor, and I'll show you on the other side so that you can see better. The aim is to get the toes of one foot back while still staying on the prop. So you need a fairly stable prop. And then again, you get that stretch. You can weigh the knee down slightly. And for some people, there's just too much pressure on the back. And you could definitely do this last one with a lower setting brick, but it doesn't work for everyone. But if it works, it can be pretty efficient. So let's just try it out. Feel free to come back to the lunge, of course, if that works better. So lie on your back, place a prop at an appropriate height underneath the sacrum, the very end of the spine, the bony bit. And then take one knee into the chest. And if you can't reach the knee easily or the thigh with a hand or both hands, use a belt and then stretch the other leg out. And for many people, the leg will hover depending on your brick height, of course, or prop height. If the heel's on the floor, that's fine. But you're definitely not trying to push the heel down into the floor. So if it hovers naturally, depends also how tall you are, of course, then let it hover. If you need to adjust the height of your prop, go for it. Good, really nice. Now, release the top foot back to the floor, and then the leg that was straight, take the toes way back. See if you can point the toes back, and you're sort of tucking the toes back. Maybe you can reach the toes with your hand, and then you're letting the knee come forward and down a little bit again. Again, make sure this feels okay. Don't put too much pressure into the knee. Don't push it down hard. Just be sensitive. And then release and place the foot back to the floor. Good. And then that same knee could come into the chest, the knee that was just folding back, or the foot that was just folding back. And then straighten the other leg. Good. So there's not an awful lot of stuff that can efficiently stretch the psoas. So we just have to use the things we have. There is a good stretch you can do from a pigeon pose, but then pigeon has other issues in that it doesn't work for everyone's knees. You could play always a little bit with the angle, maybe take the knee out a little bit, see whether that changes anything in the other leg or not. And then again, releasing that top foot down, and then the leg that was straight, bend the knee, point the toes, and tuck the toes back behind and to the outside of the hip, as it were. And then release and come off your prop, releasing the hips back down again, and take one knee into the chest. And you can keep your prop nearby. You may want to use it in a moment. Take that knee out to the side, lift your head, see if you can hold on to the foot with the other hand. So it's a little bit of a hip opener. So you want the knee to move away from you and the heel to move towards you. And if you happen to have a prop at the appropriate height, I'm using a medium height brick, then you can place that underneath the head. And for some people, you can wrap a forearm around the foot, keep the foot flexed wherever you go. So this is now really stretching and opening into the hip, but you want the knee to move away from you as the foot comes closer. So this is basically a reclining pigeon, and it has the advantage that we can regulate the pressure on the knee particularly, where more sensitivity lies, but then of course also on the hip a lot more. And then release and swap sides, taking the other knee into the chest, take the knee out to the side. You can always lift the torso up much higher initially, flexing the foot, letting the knee move away from you, moving the heel toward you, foot stays really nice and active. And, I mean, for me, on one side, the wrapping around works really quite well at the moment. On the other side, it really doesn't. So sides can be much different. Good, lovely. And then eventually release. And if you have a soft prop, like a blanket you can roll up, you could place it underneath the knees. But if you just want to sort of remove all props and lie flat on the floor, that's fine. If you just want to sit for a couple of minutes, that's fine. So make yourself comfortable wherever you are. Make sure that you're warm enough. And just let yourself rest and slowly let the attention travel all the way down into the feet and relax the feet so they become really floppy, so that for some people the toes flop out, for some people in. So let the feet be heavy, relaxed, the heels settle into the ground. And then let that awareness travel up through the ankles, ankles relaxed, and the calves and the shins soft and just rotating in whichever direction is natural. A sense of release and heaviness. Soften into the knees. Sometimes we can just feel a sort of sense of disentanglement in the knees. So just a sort of releasing into the knees that is not particularly tangible. It's just something we can imagine happening in the knees. And then the strong muscles of the thighs, can you deliberately let go of tension? There may be residual tension that you can't remove, and that's fine, but just a little bit of a softness, a heaviness, a release, letting go. The fronts of the thighs right at the top, the iliopsoas. And then the back, the glutes, strong muscles there. And the whole area around the hips. And from there, let the attention travel and just sweep into the rest of the body, up through the torso, into the arms, into the head. And just for the last few breaths here, just relax the whole body as much as you can right now. And then start to take a couple more deeper breaths. Maybe moving fingers and toes. And if you would like to take a stretch out, you could reach the arms all the way up and overhead and take a big inhale to stretch out. And then relax with the exhale. Walking the feet closer to you. You could rock up to sit, or you could roll over to your right side and come up to sit. Maybe just closing your eyes for a moment, feeling into the body, just acknowledging what has happened, how you're feeling now. And then take a deep inhale. And with the exhale, releasing the chin down toward the chest. And if the eyes are closed, you can gently open them and eventually lift the chin back up. Thank you so much for joining. Really well done. That was great.